At 7:12 each evening, while the kettle was still deciding itself, Iris moved the paper back 2 inches to the left. The shelf over the radiator was the only place in the apartment where the small silver computer fit without looking punitive. It was the size of a bread box turned the wrong way, with a round fan grill on one side and a thin seam of warmer air that came off it once the evening run had settled into speed. If she left a book too close, the spine softened. If she left a candle there, it bent. Plants had died on that shelf in 2 separate apartments. Arithmetic was what the spot turned out to be good for. The machine had no monitor. It lived by itself above the stack of records she played rarely now, 1 Ethernet cable tacked along the baseboard and 1 power cord looped neatly down behind the radiator valve. At 7:12, the script kicked over from waiting to working. The fan rose a note, held it, and stayed there for the next several hours. Iris heard the change the way she heard the refrigerator deciding to run or the upstairs shower crossing into the pipes. Not important. Only part of the room remembering its job. She filled the kettle from the bathroom sink because the kitchen tap had begun giving everything a penny taste in March. While the water heated, she opened the local page on her laptop. Completed squarings, 68,441,239,552. Urge, checkpoint interval, 1,000,000. Last checkpoint written, 68,441,000, Sufiad Shakfusgraven. Secret each tivinal, 1,000,000. Last checkpoint written, 68,441,000, Mitholjar. Estimated remaining time, 611 days, 4 hours. The number had been 612 the night before. Or 610. She had stopped being sure. She shut the laptop, poured the water over tea, and carried the mug to the couch. The fan kept on at the same pitch. In the window over the fire escape, the evening had gone the color of dishwater. Someone on the next building's roof had strung 2 lines of laundry so high they looked from here like notes held on a staff. At the frame shop, she cut mats and wrapped finished work in brown paper and low-tack tape. By the end of the day, there was always a fine white chalk on the cuffs of her shirt from the mat cutter and a pinch in the web of her right hand where she pressed the steel ruler flat. She liked the exactness of it. Not the art, which she saw too much of and mostly forgot, but the measurements, the little clean corners, the way a thing looked more serious once it had a border placed around it. Tonight she had brought home a stack of sample corners from the scrap bin, because the owner was sending her to Sacramento on Monday to help open the shop's second location, and Paige from upstairs knew somebody between leases who might want the apartment for the 12 days. Iris had spent half an hour before dinner putting away the embarrassing things. A robe with a tear under one sleeve. The bowl of spent batteries on the entry table. 3 unmatched socks she had apparently been auditioning for something. When she first set it up, 3 apartments ago, she had tuned it with the concentration she now reserved for misbehaving corners and warped cheap frames. She benchmarked the loop on borrowed hardware, adjusted the checkpoint interval, changed fans twice because the first one clicked and the second one made an anxious mosquito sound at load. She chose the parameters the way a person chose a lock for a gate they expected to use for years. Long enough, not theatrical, just long enough to outlast a phase of her life she did not want to rush through. At 8 there was a knock. Iris put down her mug and looked once, automatically, at the shelf before she crossed the room. The prospective subletter was younger than she'd expected, though that might only have meant less tired. His name was Naveen. Paige stood behind him in the hall with her own mug and the expression of a person delivering a borrowed casserole dish. "I'm not coming in," Paige said. "I only promised him you were normal." "That was careless," Iris said. Paige laughed once, satisfied at having transferred the responsibility, and went back upstairs. Naveen came in carrying a canvas tote and a bike helmet. He had the polite, alert look of someone trying not to seem as if he were measuring another person's life against his own. Iris knew the look because she had worn it in other people's apartments often enough. She showed him the bathroom first, because it was the only room that improved with early explanation. then the bedroom, which was mostly bed, then the kitchen with its narrow strip of counter and the hostile tap. Use the bathroom sink for tea, she said. The kitchen one tastes like 6 pennies and a key. Good to know. The landlord says they're replacing something in the basement. Are they? No. He smiled then, relieved to have found the tone. The living room was last because it was also first. The couch, the records, the radiator, the shelf. The machine's fan held its steady note above them, almost enough to disappear unless the room went quiet around it. Naveen looked up. Does that have to stay on? Yes. He set the helmet on the arm of the couch. Is it server-related, or should I be more concerned than server-related? Less? I think. She looked up at it with him. The silver case had a dent on one corner from the move to this apartment when the box of winter shoes slid in the van. She had never bothered to bend it back. It's a time lock puzzle. He waited. That's not a term people use in their normal lives, she said. Sorry. No, go ahead. She sat on the armchair and gestured for him to take the couch, because there was no dignified way to explain the shelf from standing beneath it. A few years ago, she said, I sealed a message inside a computation that has to take a certain amount of time. Not because the math is fancy. Because it's stubborn. It squares a number, then squares the result, then squares that, over and over, for years, in order. There isn't a useful shortcut unless you turn it into a different problem. Naveen looked at the shelf again, and the message comes out at the end. If it ever gets there, yes. What kind of message? My own. To yourself. It is a very inefficient way to mail yourself something. He laughed, which helped. So every evening, he nodded at the machine. It starts another run at 7:12. It saves state every million steps, otherwise one power outage makes you want to throw it into traffic. Can it be moved? I'd rather you didn't. Can it be turned off? I'd rather you didn't. Is it dangerous? Only in the sense that it makes visitors ask reasonable questions. Is it expensive? Iris thought about this. Less than a space heater. More than a lamp. And if the power goes out? When it comes back, you press the black button once. It'll pick up from the last checkpoint. She stood and crossed to the shelf, pointing without touching. This one. Not the silver one. The silver one looks important and isn't. Naveen got up beside her. Close to, the machine looked even smaller. An object assembled from the wrong kinds of patience. Dust had gathered in the grill despite the vacuuming she did on Sundays. The warm air slid over the backs of the records below it and made the edge of a sleeve quiver. Why? He said, not meaning the button. Iris leaned against the radiator. At the time, it seemed like the correct amount of trouble. Naveen took that without asking her to improve it. Do you remember what's in it? I don't remember. He looked at her then, not at the machine. His face did not perform sympathy, which she appreciated. That's kind of funny, he said after a moment. Yes, Iris said. It is. The room stayed there with them. The bad shelf, the radiator knocking once inside its pipes, the records she never quite played enough, the fan doing its small impersonation of weather. Naveen asked the rest of the apartment questions after that. Trash night. Laundry in the basement or down the block. Whether the upstairs neighbors were theatrical. Whether the front buzzer stuck. They circled back once to the machine only to establish that if he took the sublet, he did not need to watch the counter or report the number to anyone. So I can ignore it. That's basically its whole philosophy. At the door, he said he'd let Paige know in the morning. Iris said fine, and meant it. When he left, the apartment seemed briefly larger in the way rooms did after a second body stopped proving their size. Then the fan became audible again. Not louder, only returned. Iris went to the kitchen and rinsed the tea from her mug. She wiped the counter with the side of her hand, gathered the sample frame corners into a stack, and put them back in her work tote for Sacramento. On the table by the couch sat the legal pad where she'd been making a list for whoever stayed here. Wi-Fi password, super's number, bathroom sink for tea, don't buzz in delivery people after midnight unless you ordered them yourself. She added, small silver computer on shelf stays plugged in, then crossed it out. It sounded proprietary, like the beginning of a warning in a motel binder. She tore off the page and started again. This time she wrote more plainly. Silver box on living room shelf. Please leave on, if apartment loses power. Press black button once. It is doing something slow and harmless. She stopped there. The fan went on above her, moving the warm air just enough that the corner of the page lifted and settled. Lifted and settled. There were other instructions she could have written. The local page lived under a bookmark named Puzzle. The counter would be a little larger each day. The estimate was unreliable in both directions. If the noise changed sharply, that meant the dust in the grill needed clearing with the soft brush from the window ledge. If the machine finally completed while she was in Sacramento, it would not ring or flash or make any kind of grateful sound. It would only write plain tapes to disk in a directory whose name had once seemed funny to her. She did not write any of that. Instead, she carried the fresh page to the kitchen and set it under the sugar jar beside the kettle, where someone else would find it while the water heated. From there, she could see the shelf through the doorway. The machine had the same shape it always had. One dented corner, one round grill filmed lightly with city dust, one strip of warm air she had arranged the room around without meaning to admit it. Earlier, before Naveen arrived, she had moved the paperback away from the exhaust so the glue in the spine would not loosen. Now the spot beside the kettle held a sheet of instructions for a person she did not know well enough yet to picture. The fan kept its note. After a moment, Iris opened the laptop again and brought up the local page. Completed squarings, 68,447,239,552. The best we feels is black text on a white field. Nothing pulsed, nothing celebrated. The number had advanced by 6 million since T. She looked at it, then at the page under the sugar jar and shut the laptop without writing the new figure down anywhere.